Welcome to African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund, a best practices exchange. I am Luana Holland Moore, Associate Program Officer of the Action Fund. And today we will share info about the Action Fund and its National Grant Program. I am joined by our panelist, Danielle Del Sol from the Preservation Resource Center of New Orleans, Maisa Tisdale from the Mary and Eliza Freeman Center for History and Community in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Gwendolyn Trice from Maxwell Heritage Interpretive Center in Joseph, Oregon, who will share their experiences with us. First, I'd like to tell you about the Action Fund. Created in 2017 in response to the events in Charlottesville, the Action Fund is committed to creating a narrative that expands our view of history by telling the full story of African American historic sites. We are a multi-year, $25 million initiative. We hope to continue to draw attention to the remarkable and still largely unrecognized collection of places and stories of African American activism and achievement. African American history is American history, and through the elevation of those stories, we contribute to that narrative. We just wrapped up year 3 of our grant cycle and awarded $1.6 million to 27 African American historic sites and organizations nationwide in 4 categories: capital projects, programming and interpretation, project planning, and organizational capacity. We have awarded a total of $4.3 million in funding to 65 sites and organizations so that they may accomplish their goals. All 3 of our panelists today represent each year of our Action Fund awardees to date. I'd like to ask the 3 of you to briefly tell us about yourselves and your projects. And let's start with Maisa, who was part of our inaugural awardees in 2018.
Hi, my name is Maisa Tisdale, and I'm the president and CEO of the Mary and Eliza Freeman Center for History and Community. And we started out as a grassroots effort to save historic homes from demolition. And so over the years, we acquired the property and we began the process of trying to restore them. We, in fact, would like to start a historic site and a larger center of national significance in the south end of Bridgeport.
Thank you, Maisa. Next, we have Danielle, and she is from year 2, 2019.
Hi, I'm Danielle Del Sol. I'm the director of the Preservation Resource Center. And we have launched, thanks to seed funding from this grant, a new program called Revival Grants. And what we do is we are helping low-income homeowners, specifically in the Treme neighborhood, with free home repairs to their homes. It is the amelioration of a cycle that is really detrimental to residents in this neighborhood. The neighborhood is under full local jurisdiction of our historic district, which means that they have the kind of highest level in New Orleans of protection for their historic homes. But if their historic homes do not meet the regulations of our design guidelines, that means that they get fines, citations, and then fines from the city. So basically, low-income homeowners whose homes needed repairs were getting cited by the city for demolition by neglect and would have to go to City Hall every year to plead poverty and have a commission of people basically tell them, okay, we get that you can't pay these fines. You have 1 more year to fix your house. But the fines would continue to sit on them. So what our program does is we use the violations on people's homes as a work scope, and we pay for all of the work that needs to be done. And we're working hand in hand with the city on this process. And the great thing about that is once we finish the project and the home has been repaired, the city forgives the homeowner's fines. And so the homeowner walks away with a home that is safer, more beautiful, and the debt that has been sitting on them from our municipality has been cleared.
Thank you, Danielle. And next we have Gwen, who will tell us more about Maxville.
And that is with the Maxville town site. And we are preserving that site and in the process of purchasing that for our Maxville Heritage Interpretive Center space. That will include forestry land. It will also have an outdoor school as well as archaeology study, facilitated tours, events, and guides to really begin to connect in a deeper way a space that was owned by a southern logging company that actually recruited African American loggers to live in the state of Oregon. But it was during the time when we had exclusion laws on the books in 1923. And so to have this space actually owned by a Black-led organization that's doing education, curriculum, forestry education, archaeology of the site of this segregated town, it really helps us to bring home in Oregon a place, a physical space that not only students within school systems are available to come in and be a part of, but also students that are part of lifelong learners that are interested in our history and that are just really captivated by that work. We're providing that space. So in order to do that, we need to absolutely expand the capacity of our organizations so that we can realize those goals that we've set out.
Thank you, everyone. I suppose now we can go ahead and I'll start my first question, which is, what made you decide to apply? What was it about this particular grant? And we'll start with Danielle.
Sure. Timing was everything for us. So our idea for the Revival Grants program was something that had been brewing amongst members of our staff and board for many years. It was the kind of a conversation that just kept going. And what if we could do this thing? And so it really was many years in the making, but it was kind of a confluence of this grant program coming to life. So we didn't apply for the first year, but by the second year, we had heard about it, we knew about it. And what intrigued us about it was at the very same time that we were learning about the fund, the neighborhood of Treme, which is one of the, if not the oldest African-American neighborhood in the country, was undergoing dramatic change due to short-term rental proliferation. So Airbnbs were popping up everywhere. People were being, low-income renters were being pushed out so that their homes could be turned into Airbnbs. Homeowners who had been there for generations were being made offers they couldn't refuse by out-of-state developers. And we heard from community members who were hanging on, just their complete dismay about how their neighborhood was disintegrating before their own eyes. And we realized that if we could start this program we'd been talking about forever, but really focus it on the neighborhood of Treme to start, that we could make a dramatic impact and really help the neighbors who had been there for so long, whose very lives made this neighborhood so unique. That was something that we thought the National Trust would appreciate. And y'all did. We're so thrilled to get the grant. So really it was kind of a confluence of all these things happened at around the same time, and we realized it seemed like a wonderful fit.
Thank you, Gwendolyn.
Hi, yes. So this space it's just been such an exciting component of our identity in the space where we live, because I am a descendant of those African-American loggers that came to Oregon, and my connection with the National Trust truly has been years long, and being a diversity scholar over the last few years that we've had this organization, we've really made a connection with the National Trust and the Smithsonian and some of their works that they brought out to Oregon for fundraising and learning how to make connections in a broader sense with some of that work that we've done. And so to just really look at how that ties into this long-term goal that we've had of connecting a sense of place and the land to the people, and it doesn't exclude anyone. Again, it's telling that American narrative with the inclusion of everyone inside of that space. So it's talks about, part of that work includes all of the people of color who have been loggers in Oregon. And Oregon is a timber state. That's how a lot of monies were built and a lot of towns were built, was behind that timber industry. But to really bring all of our voices into the space to represent all those perspectives, now we're getting a truer sense of what the history is by including those and enveloping that and telling this. And we've been guided really through the work of the National Trust, step by step, to get to those places.
Thank you, Gwen. Maisa?
Well, for us, the grant was a godsend. The program came just in the nick of time. Our community had been fighting to save these houses at that point for 20 years. And we didn't have a lot of money to do it with. So, and when people think of Connecticut, they usually think of a place where everybody's wealthy. And I remember when I was calling, trying to get help for our organization, someone came out and said, there are no Black people in Connecticut. What do you mean there's a Black community, or there even was one?
No.
So what happened is we fought really hard to save these houses. If love alone would have saved these two houses that were owned by African-American sisters and built in 1848, the houses would have already been restored. But love alone can't do it. And although we're the largest city in Connecticut, Bridgeport is, and although we're the most densely packed, we're also the second poorest. So all of our kids qualify for free lunch. I mean, that's what we're talking about. So we had to reach out in order to save the houses. We too had come to that point where we were asked to prove that we could restore these houses. In our town as well, in our city as well, there's no distinction between historic homes and buildings that are just plain blighted. And so we would get called before the Blight Commission to come in hearings and told to prove that we could in fact restore these houses, because they could actually do the same thing, take possessions of the houses and demolish them. So there was this pressure that was always there, and we didn't have the money to get started. This program was great for us because it allowed planning money. And the problem we always ran into is there was no funding for planning. And when we would go to look for help, they'd say, well, we're looking for shovel-ready products, or we're looking for projects, or we want to have a detailed budget. We couldn't have those things because we couldn't hire architects to make the plans. And so losing the houses also threatened to once again bury the history of an 1820s African-American community in the antebellum North. Telling that story, even knowing that there were people there who built a prosperous community, was something that had to be told. And we knew that if we lost these houses, we'd probably lose this story again. So when the grant came along, it seemed like it was a miracle, because we could finally hire the architect we'd been hanging on to for years, saying, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. The grant came along just in the nick of time, got us out of the hearings for the Blight Commission, and we could move forward.
Thank you. That kind of leads into my next question. That what was it like for you when you were filling out the letter of intent? That first, foot in the door beginning of the process. What type of considerations did you have to take into account for your organization, such as budget or operations? Um, let's start with Gwen this time.
Thank you. Is truly there have been multiple challenges in doing this, and we got our grant in 2020, but we've tried every year it's been available. And so we've been, we've been aware of it before it became available. We knew that it was happening, and we had really planned, and we all have this energy around our projects and the urgency for it. And so I just knew that it was going to happen that first time. And when it didn't happen, I had some disappointment, and I would call back and talk with the National Trust, and they said, no, don't worry about it. This is just the beginning. You try again and be a part of that. And so one of the things that we began to do is not only just begin to build the materials around each LOI, is to begin to expand the people that were helping me to work on it in our region, or working with other partnerships. For instance, we ended up with a woman that's from Portland that was taking a folklore class in Michigan, and she had some credits to help with grant writing, and she stepped right into the work because we do a lot of folkloric, roots foods and roots music, and making those connections to the place that people lived here. And so she was an incredible asset. And we brought in a couple of other folks that had different strengths. And so really it was taking and building muscle tone for this grant writing process of people that really loved the project and believed in the work that we did. And so it was really making sure that we would talk to each other and that we would keep it fresh. And what I found was this time on the LOI, it was so critical to come back to the National Trust. And Luana was the person that I talked to the most, and she shepherded us through, what did we do? What could we have done different? And it wasn't always, the answers weren't always, you could have done this better or this. Part of it has to do with there's only so much funding, and you are a strong candidate, and this is why we went a different way last time. So for us, it was important to hear those components because it let us know that we were valued, that our project had value, and that not to give up, not to say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And I don't give up on anything. All the folks that I've been working with to purchase this site of Maxville, and we just got $120,000 this month to pay toward that acquisition from one of our funders. It's, they used to call me the crazy lady from the people that own the land, because I would just say, I'd like $90,000 and access to your land. And they're like, what? And they went from there to just say, you are just really tenacious, and we wouldn't want anyone else to have this space to do this cultural work that you're doing today. So without weaving through and being bolstered over and over again through that LOI process, I don't know, the energy for it. I'd like to say we'll never give up no matter what, but it's a new thing to have an organization like ours in a very tiny rural community in Oregon being seen as a legitimate cause and organization from a national organization. So it's been powerfully emotional, and it's bolstered my spirit for the work.
Thank you, Gwen. Maisa, could you please tell us a bit about your experience?
Um, Never ever give up, always have that faith. And we had it all along. So what we did is, even when there didn't seem to be funds available, we were constantly writing grants. And we had written enough of them over the years that we were actually prepared to make this application. It was not easy because we were all volunteers, and we built this this organization with volunteers. And so sometimes the actual mechanics of getting things out of the door and emailed on time, we have trouble with that because we're spread out all over the place. And we until now, I mean, I finally hired, by the way, after 10 years of working for free. But I didn't have the time, and other people didn't necessarily have the time that they could take from work to maybe put together the application. And so that was the stumbling point. But we had the materials, we had the historical documents, we had everything that we needed, because even during those years that when we weren't getting grants, we kept writing them as though that opportunity would come, and this was that opportunity. So we were ready to go. And because over the years we had worked with academics, Dr. Jamila Moore-Pugh out in California, and the historian who uncovered all of this, Charles Brilvich, they poured in so much time. And we also worked with our circuit writer at Preservation Connecticut, and Wes Haynes, and he helped us as well. So sometimes you do, have to reach out to other people who can help you make that deadline.
Mm-hmm.
At times we had computers that wouldn't work and internet that went down, and we had to have these people who were qualified to work along with us so that we could just make deadlines. So we got the LOI out. I thought that it was a good one. It didn't ask you for too much information. I think sometimes a lot of these programs ask for so much information. I'm not sure that they really need it in the LOI phase. But I found that it was something that was easy to fill out and that we were prepared to do it. And then our partners, Dr. Jamila Moore-Pugh and Charles Brilvich and Wes Haynes, they were there so that we could get this document out of the door.
I like to tell everybody that's by design, that the LOI is meant to be relatively simple, because we understand the fact that you might be an organization with that one person who's doing everything, or who might not have development or grant writing experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's absolutely by design. Danielle,
That's wonderful.
Danielle, if you could share your experiences with us.
Yeah. The LOI process for us was really kind of a reckoning because we thought we knew how we were going to do this big new thing. And we thought we had all of the information that we needed. We'd been talking with people in the community. We had for many years a department of the PRC called Rebuilding Together New Orleans that did more safe at home repairs, but they did construction. So we had kind of a lot of the elements of what we needed to put this program together. But when we actually sat down to write the LOI, we realized, oh no, how is this actually going to work? So it really, we maybe even were a little starry-eyed still in the LOI process, saying, oh yeah, we're going to spend $10,000 a house and we'll do 10 houses in a year. It's going to be great. And then really, as we started talking through it and realizing all the different components of every single part of this project, we were just like, oh my goodness. And then that continued through the application phase too, where we really actually had to sit down and say, okay, if someone wants to hire their cousin to do this work, how are we going to handle that? And so then we realized, okay, we need a vetted contractors list. Well, how is a contractor vetted? what qualifies them to be on our list, and then so every component of our project really took so much thorough planning and thinking through, and the LOI process really started that for us, and then really made us get our act together right quick so that we could put in an application that actually was feasible and doable.
Well, I've anyone who's had a chance to actually talk to me during the LOI process has probably heard me say, what is your ask? Be clear. Always be clear about your ask and what your project is about. Because when it comes to us on our end, those are the type of things we're looking for. Is your ask clear? Is one thing matching another in terms of what you're trying to say and do here? And in talking about, that side of being evaluated, I'll share a little bit of it from our side. And pretty much, once we received the LOIs, and we've received a total of over 1,600 in our 3 years. And the call for LOIs is usually in the very beginning of December. And it undergoes an evaluation process that involves trust staffers and then also external reviewers from Harvard's Hutchinson Center for African and African American Research, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, AACHAF, and the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. And those hundreds of LOIs that we get every year are then whittled down to about 50 that are invited to submit full applications. And so you've touched on your application process and thoughts a bit. What was that like for you, and how did you feel that differed from when you were preparing your LOIs? And let's start with Maisa.
Well, that's when we had to do a lot of the nuts and bolts kind of thinking that Danielle was talking about, figuring out, the time frame for it, who would come in when. That's when we took the time to get down sort of to the nitty gritty of it all. And what we did, because we were volunteers and we didn't necessarily, the knowledge wasn't in the head of any one person. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. So we had sort of a brain trust that came together. Because we had already been working on the project for 10 years, we had an array of people who could give, firsthand advice, contractors who said, well, I don't think that number's quite right because here it always costs this much. Or you can figure that you're going to have this happen and you can't start until this or then. I mean, people were very detailed. They knew their fields. I would say not to be hesitant about reaching out to other people who are experts in small aspects of your project. So once you take a really close look at it and you know what the steps are, that's when you really reach out to your network. And we were fortunate that way, because what I'm telling you, Gwendolyn, it was an act of faith for us too. We refused, well, I don't think it really entered our mind that we wouldn't see this project through. We just didn't know how long it would take, whether it would be 10 years or 100 years, but we knew that we would keep going until this happened. So we always kept acquiring experts in our network. And when this happened, when we had the opportunity for this grant, especially, it felt like this is our grant. This is our program. This one was made for us, so let's just bring everybody together virtually, because people had spread out all over the country by then, and we all worked together on this. I mean, the hardest part of it was just the timing, getting everybody's piece in time. Then everyone looked over the application again and gave feedback. And so we were ready for this process when it came as much as we could be, but we had a lot of refining to do between the LOI and the actual grant application. So I think people should make sure that they allocate enough time to really iron out those details.
Thank you. I like to say the application is kind of that reckoning, truly,
Exactly.
that you were talking
Yeah.
about. You realize that certain expectations that you have might need to be changed, downsized, changed or scope, things like that. And it's that time to really think about it. Gwen, why don't you tell us about your experience with it?
So yeah, this, because we've been sort of in that trench for a while too of figuring out how to do the work, and I know what I'm very comfortable with my skill sets and know when it's time to bring in subject matter experts. And so we've been really partnering. We live in a community. Let me just set the tone. We live in a community that the county itself is the size of Rhode Island and a half, with just over 7,000 people, and only maybe a handful and a half are look like me. And there's some diversity here, and it's not, I mean, I don't look at, we don't look at diversity by the color of the skin. There's so much diversity that we are teaching a lot of that diversity to the people that live here, because they're remote and have never moved out of the space. So I'm dealing with a lot of people that are kind and essentially really good people, but they have no um, knowledge base of what we bring to the table, that it's not a fear-based thing, but it's an acknowledgement of all these people that lived, that thrived, that had lifelong friendships in this space. In that journey for the first few years, it was pretty short. And but what I've noticed is we have, our partnerships are huge, from the county commissioners to there's an organization that we're partnering with right now, that our annual gathering, that was a loan that I did all that footwork for. They stepped up and said, we've got this huge group of people that can do all that work that you were doing, and we'll raise the money, and then you can have your fundraiser inside of that. But they're a forest, they're a timber and watershed stewardship organization, which is perfect for us because that's what we're building, we're going to. And so they provide, part of their wheelhouse is to provide that community-based timber management programming for the forested lands that we'll have. And so it's gone like that. The local economic district, I've worked with them for years, and they've helped us to bring in roundtable discussions in regard to white privilege, and to how to be a good ally, and to helping this baseline of folks, not within their businesses, within their public services, for families that are in need, and those different things that are offered, that we can begin to have that change, because the change comes very slowly in spaces, and to begin to action through behavior has been really helpful, because now our partnerships are really strong within this community, where they're not only providing services and fundraising support, they're also providing, we're restoring one of the original buildings back on site. And we had a gentleman, he said he's been following me since I was 17, which it was it was a great example of thank you, because he says, I've seen you grow up, and I've seen you come back home and the work you do. And I'm an engineer, and I will give 100% of that effort toward getting that building back up. The same thing with legal. We've had a nephew of mine that worked at a huge legal firm here, and they just happened to brought him here. He says, hey, my auntie's there, go meet with them. And I met with them in bib overhauls for dinner, and told my story, and they said, you have us for years to come for all your legal needs. And so there's things that have tipped in such a way that it's just really keeping track of that wonderful in-kind that's coming in to help to bring land moving equipment, to help us clean up the space. All of those pieces equate to funding for that. And then it was really, again, it's about continually getting those in order in the space with letters of support from all of those entities, sharing specifically how they're going to help this organization in multiple ways. And then the team that's helping us to build that application, it's, putting that list out and assigning tasks for each one of us, so that this is done, now this is done, that now this is done, and we'll meet again this week, and these are due in this period of time. So it gives us time to really dig into the meat of it, change whatever we may have to. And part of it is one of our foundations provided funding for a master plan that we were able to build in the land purchase prospectus inside of that framework, so that we could again work with contractors that and again here, most everyone I'm going to hire is an ally or they are dominant culture. And so it's allowed us to go out and seek contractors that are people of color with experience working with other cultural projects successfully, for us to pull all of that together. And so we were able to bring all of that to you.
Thank
with
you.
Our application.
No, that's really good to hear. So much of what you've been saying so far, Maisa and Gwen, are about partnerships and really coming together and pulling those resources from those around you. Danielle, if you could speak to your experience, please.
Yeah, I'll totally echo that that theme of partnerships. So as we were completing the LOI, and you don't know what you don't know until you know, and we realized here's what we don't know. Even though we looked and we couldn't find any program that matched exactly what we were trying to do anywhere else in the country, we knew that there were so many programs that did parts of what we were trying to do. And so between the LOI and the application periods, we had tons of meetings with preservation organizations across the country, and then a lot of rebuilding people in New Orleans to figure out how they did different aspects of what we were trying to do. And that was incredibly helpful to kind of pick and choose processes that would work for our organization, and processes that worked just with our mentality. Some of the nonprofit, charitable, kind of social service type work that we were looking at left a bad taste in our mouth. And we decided that we really wanted to focus on being as respectful to homeowners as possible throughout every stage of the process. This included, some organizations will take everybody's photo. Some people might not want to pose in front of their house and have us blast that across the universe. Other people that we've worked with are so excited that they want us to come and take their photo in front of their house. So, stuff like that sounds simple, but it's part of an overall ethos of how are you going to run this program, and how are you going to interact with the homeowners that you're working with? It's very sensitive information that we have to get from them. We have to verify that they are low to middle income. And so that means that we have to verify their income through bank accounts or through their employer. And so they're entrusting us with some of the most sensitive information about who they are. We want to entrust them by letting them know, this is your home. This might be your largest asset. You are in control here. We are here to help you realize what you want to realize with your home and your future. So that all took a lot of thought and very careful planning.
Thank you, Danielle. Just to let you know what happens when those applications come back to us, pretty much a similar round of reviews that narrows them down to our final awardees, and it's extremely competitive process. I keep telling people, just like we were saying earlier about Gwen, I think was saying, we kept trying, and that's what I keep telling people. If you didn't this year, try again next year. And what it is, panelists, we talk so much about the program itself, but I know on my end, I don't always get to hear what happens when you receive the award. So what was it like when you found out that you received it, and what has happened as a result for your site or organization? And let's
Sorry, Luana, you muted yourself.
let's start with Maisa.
Oh my gosh. There were rays from heaven and music in the background. No, it was really, it was amazing for us. This happened to us on the heels of being placed on the 11 most endangered list. And so when that happened and national, if not international recognition was brought to our site, and the value of our story, the community, people who had been involved, 10, 20 years before, we gathered them for the 11 most endangered. And so that sort of sent up flares, I think, that went beyond the sky in our little city, and we started hearing from people all over. But at the end of sort of that celebration, there's one person who is always sort of your Eeyore, right? He said, but they didn't give you any money. What are you gonna do with no money? And so I was like, well, we'll cross that bridge next. So when the money came in after that, and there was this program, it was great for people to hear that there was a program for African Americans. There was a sense of pride. There was a sense of pride that there was foundation support for our stories, that our history was real. And also people who had been in city government and state government, who had been our cheerleaders, but maybe had nothing to go forward with and advocate on our behalf. They finally could say, look, they have the money for planning. And they've been recognized nationally. And this program that gave them this grant is highly competitive. Wouldn't we look awful if we didn't step up now? And so we had help from government on a local and state level that we had people who believed in us, but it was hard for them to advocate for us when we had no money to get started. And there were programs that were matching programs, but we never had the match. So this was especially good because we didn't have to match it, and we could go ahead out and get started. So it really changed things for us in a way that things hadn't been changed in our entire existence, both as scrappy grassroots preservationists and people who are proud of our story, to, even after we got incorporated and we were working so hard together as volunteers. Money makes a difference. You can have the love and the intentions, but you need money to get started. And it made all the difference because then we could plan.
Thanks, Maisa.
Oh, we celebrated a lot.
Danielle, if you could quickly share.
Yeah, we celebrated too. We shut the office down early and bought a few bottles of champagne, and it was really fun. We were thrilled. For us, it was wind underneath our sails because we had been through a lot of change in the year prior to receiving the grant. I had come on as the new director. My predecessor had been there for 37 years. And so we were completely rethinking the organization and how we did what we did in New Orleans. And so to have the national trust give us such an amazing grant was total validation that we were moving in the right direction. It was such an incredible honor. And so the spirit was really amazing. And what it allowed us to do, like Maisa said, was leverage it. We didn't have money until we got that money. And then we were able to go to funders. Because when we went to funders and said, well, no one's signed on yet, but you could be the first. I mean, it's really just not as powerful as to say we have seed funding from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I mean, that's a seller. And so we really were able to fundraise from that point really successfully.
Well, see, I know Maisa didn't share her leveraging of.
I thought maybe that was a later question. Do you want me to share it now?
Yes.
All right. So, when we received the grant from the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund, someone in the office at State Historical Preservation, he goes, wow, that's really competitive. We didn't get one, right? Because they had applied for another program. And he really began advocating on our behalf, reaching out to different people in different city offices and state programs that could help us. By the end of the day, we got a first grant for $1 million. It's all bricks and mortar, but $1 million. And the thing is, I had written them a letter, and so you write these letters, you send them out. We talked about this whole process, with the National Trust and with this fund in particular. It was, I think, also validation for us that, in a sense, people who knew the history of African Americans also recognized that this was significant. And so I'm sitting there in the parking lot of an Indian takeout place, and I get a call on my cell phone, and I'm told that we got $1 million. I was like, I didn't know what to do. There was no one with me. I couldn't jump up and down. I'm just sitting in the parking lot. I went in and I ordered the rose custard for dessert. And
I know on our end, we were like, what?
I know, it was pretty amazing. But that was leveraged for another 0.6 million. I mean, yeah. So now we have 1.6 from state and city, different state and city preservation and development funds to move this project forward. But we had to be able to have, like everyone else has said, we needed that validation. It needed to be on a national level from a preservation organization. And we needed to have the recognition from African American scholars that we were indeed important. Our story was in fact real. And so with that, there was a lot of enthusiasm that came out of the community. A lot of other people came forward and said, we're gonna help you, and we're gonna help you a lot. And so we've really been on a roll since then in terms of getting financial support for the organization. And that had been completely lacking. It just seemed like there was nowhere to get money.
Thank you, Maisa. And Gwen, if you could very quickly tell us
I'm sorry.
what it was like for you as one of our newest recipients.
So I have to tell you, I did shed a few tears. It was so amazing that we were a part of. And really during that same year, we applied for the Inspire grant as well for a collection specialist. And we got that shortly afterwards. And I've been working with the Black leadership since we've gotten the accolades from the African American Action Fund grant. And now other Black people in my state know I'm out here and that we exist. And so I'm starting to get phone calls and meeting with people who are part of these foundations that want to find out how can we help, what can we do, we would like to come out and see you. Whereas I felt hidden before, we were out front. And part of that, I have to say too, that I have to give some kudos to the Smithsonian. We had 2 people from their organization come out, I went for some training and found out that I had a major sickness. And they just says, well, you know, we really, you know, you're an anomaly. Nobody's doing what you're doing across the United States, and we want to see you healthy. And they took that needle and threaded it with, you know, back to the National Trust. And I know you work very closely together doing multiple things, and you have come out here and it wasn't a band-aid that you've given us an elixir to have a life, have a real life, that we are a part of a bigger piece. In fact, Smithsonian Magazine just came out and did an article of me on site, and it won't be out till the spring, but it's just, I have to keep pinching myself because it just doesn't feel like it's our hard work that's actually out here. And I need to find a way that I can ground myself in the joy of what can happen. So we're looking at AmeriCorps rare students to bring in trained folks to come in, and we're looking at multiple ways of leveraging that. And the last I'll say is we just applied for $750,000 as part of this package, and letting people know what we're doing. And we were one of the organizations that was chosen for the Cultural Advocacy Commission that will go to the legislation in 2021 to leverage matching funds for the site. So
Thank you, Gwen. Now, if each one of you could please tell everybody how they can find out more about your organizations, if you could share your websites. Thank you.
absolutely. You can reach and find out more information about our work at Maxville, that's MAXVILLE, heritage, HERITAGE.org.
We are at Freeman Center, that's FREEMAN Center, BPT.org.
And the PRC's website is prcno.org. If you want to read specifically about revival grants, click the programs link and you'll find revival grants. Our staff is always excited to talk about our program and share what we've learned too. So please feel free to get in touch with me or any of our staff if you want to set up a meeting.
And of course, if you'd like to know more about the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund and our grant program, please visit savingplaces.org. And I'd like to thank our panelists for sharing their experiences today. And I'd like to thank all of you for viewing our session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.